Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 99. Stop the people pleasing, please. How assertiveness makes for better relationships. All right, so as you know, all month we're talking about one of my favorite topics, assertiveness. And I think it's important that we talk about the struggles that get in the way that keep us from being more assertive. You know how last week we looked into how important emotional honesty is, making our insides match our outsides. And connected to this concept is to work on not people-pleasing and not avoiding conflict and not avoiding difficult emotions. Because here's the thing, being assertive means that we are honest, direct, and therefore courageous, right? Because we don't know what's going to show up or what's going to happen after we speak our truth. So first, let's look at some definitions and examples of people-pleasing just to make sure that we're all on the same page. If you think about emotional honesty and how it's all about vulnerability and revealing the true self, then people-pleasing, I think, is just about the opposite of that for the following reasons. First, people-pleasing focuses outside of you and on to the other person or people around you. Because you're focused on that outcome. What's going to happen? What about their possible reactions? What about the impending doom of conflict? You know, this is all fear-driven, obviously. It's because basically you're trying to control the outcome by contorting yourself to be what they need you to be in the moment. So hopefully those awful things won't happen. Impression management is another term for people-pleasing. And we really are trying to manipulate the outcome. Sounds gross, but that's what we're trying to do. A people pleaser is someone who focuses on making others happy, and they'll go to great lengths. They'll do what others may not do for them. They'll push aside their own needs, use up most of their time, energy, and money to rescue others and shower them with attention, hard work, gifts, etc., etc. And they do that because a people pleaser needs that outside approval to feel worthy because their self-worth is low and they're afraid they won't have acceptance and love and appreciation if they don't do for others. So of course, people pleasers have a hard time saying no. They often don't set limits with others for fear of rejection, of conflict, and not knowing how to handle the conflict. Some people don't want to feel the guilt for saying no. These are often people who were guilted growing up. A lot of it is unearned guilt, like we've talked about in past episodes. And then there's the shame, because then God forbid they would no longer be needed. And they have to think about all the identity that we can get from being there for others, for being what other people need us to be. That's some really powerful stuff. And it's a drug that a lot of people don't want to put down. So where does this come from? Well, a lot of people say, and you may have heard the phrase, that people pleasers start off as parent pleasers. Because as kids, we all need approval and love and acceptance from our parents to feel okay, to thrive, to believe in ourselves, to go out and make it in the world. We needed that. Parents can ignore the child's emotional needs out of their own self-absorption, their own pain, their own chaos. Maybe they just don't have time. They're overwhelmed. They're addicted. They don't know how to meet their child's needs. Sometimes it's the sad story where another sibling either has mental or physical disabilities or an illness, and the parent just doesn't have the bandwidth for the child who isn't ill or struggling. So you learn not to have needs, and or you learn to shut them down and put them away and minimize them. Maybe there was raging or shaming or fear of physical abuse. Conversely, sometimes there can just be a quiet withdrawal of love or approval from one or both parents, which gives the clear message: if you are not compliant, look out. There's no boundaries there. Do you see how they become blurred, where the child becomes responsible for the parents' fill in the blank, their emotions, their behaviors, their inabilities? And finally, kids can see their parents as fragile or volatile. And then the child often becomes parentified, like we've talked about before. And so if you're parentified, you have to shut down your own vulnerable needs of feeling loved, feeling cherished, feeling protected, feeling cared for. So instead, you're going to focus on rescuing the parent or parents. And in a crazy, sick way, it gives the child a new identity of sorts, a suit of armor to go with it that protects you from being vulnerable and thus let down and disappointed. So we learn how to people please very early in life to survive, either emotionally or physically or both. So if you struggle with people pleasing, I want you to grab some compassion and understanding for it first. You can't shame yourself into getting healthier. It doesn't work. Understanding where this may have come from for you can help you take it off yourself as a person and say, wow, I do really struggle with this, and now I know why, and I want to change it. So what are some examples of people pleasing? Like, what does it look like? Well, the most obvious one is you're really quick to agree and affirm other people, regardless of how you really feel in the moment. And I want to stop here for a moment because sometimes you're not even aware of how you really feel or what you really think. You have spent years burying that, disowning that, pushing it aside, not paying attention to it. And so it's not crazy or abnormal to not even know. Now, what often gives you a clue is you'll have a visceral reaction. You'll have anxiety, you'll have illness, you'll have some kind of irritability, something won't feel right, but you're not sure why. Typically, it presents as anxiety, like generalized anxiety. If you're a people pleaser, you're often aligned with them against the bad people, quote unquote. The ones who say no to them and call them out on their stuff and are pissed about their behavior. So you can really get sucked into the victim story or the victim charade, as it often is. And you can band with them against the other because that belongingness need is so strong. And if your self-esteem is already struggling, you don't want to risk losing the person in front of you's acceptance, right? If you struggle with people pleasing, you often don't say no when asked to do something or be something. You shove your own stuff aside almost unconsciously. You're not even thinking about it. It's not even on your radar, which is a problem. And then when your own stuff is not getting done and things start to suffer, that can really be difficult for you to rectify. You may neglect your physical, mental, and or spiritual health because you're too busy caring for other people and focusing on other people and what they need. You give too much. You overspend or you overspend your time helping others, often to your own detriment. Some people even think that it's admirable because they're so low maintenance. They don't have a lot of needs or wants or desires or opinions or requests. So those are some examples of people pleasing. So there are some big consequences to this behavior. It's not all great and caring. It can look like that in the very beginning. But even though you may get a high from that identity of being needed and being so appreciated and being valued and having a sense of purpose for a moment, it's guaranteed you're going to end up resentful and dissatisfied in your relationships because it's unequal. Your needs aren't being met. It's not sustainable because your needs aren't being met. And there's no real deep, vulnerable connection because it's not honest. And here's the thing, and I run into this all the time when I work with relationships, because what happens is the other person starts to lose respect for you and therefore can't trust you. You're too agreeable, you never argue or say no. And so that's great at the beginning because they get what they want and you're very compliant and pleasant and go with the flow. But after a while, you're not real or believable and they can't relate to you. Like, don't you ever get upset? Like, why don't you ever say no? And here's the thing. Why should they trust you if you're not being emotionally honest? You're not telling them no when you need to say no. You're not bringing up issues. They're the only ones bringing up issues. It's not real. And here's the thing. You, over time, can't even trust you. Because when your truth is whatever works in the moment for other people, hell, you probably lost yourself in a relationship by now, and you don't even know what your truth is anymore. Do you know how many times people tell me, Mary, I don't even know what I need anymore. I couldn't even tell you. Your relationships have no boundaries now either, and so negotiating and problem solving can't happen. You can't negotiate unless you have two separate, healthy enough people being honest with one another, being accepting, but knowing what they're willing to do and not willing to do. Oh, you'll eventually say something, all right. Probably in a big argument. When you stack so much dynamite of resentment, you blow everything up, sometimes beyond repair, because you didn't take care of yourself along the way. So over time, people-pleasing is not a good thing. It's destructive. And we don't end up with healthy relationships. We don't end up with vulnerable, meaningful connections. And we lose who we are. Eventually, something is going to give. So what can you do if you've identified some people-pleasing in your behavior? First of all, be proud of yourself for having the courage to admit it. And second of all, know that it is changeable over time. You just have to be committed to changing. It's a lot of changing your mind and your feelings and then your behavior. So first, I want you to stop apologizing. I want you to stop apologizing for being upset or angry when anyone in your shoes right now would have a right to feel that way. Stop apologizing for what you need. Stop apologizing for what you think, feel, or believe. That's about you and no one's business. And for your choices, as long as they feel right for you. Please stop apologizing for your talent, your beauty, or your passions. And stop feeling bad about where you are if you have worked your ass off to get there. Stop feeling bad about what you want for your life, for your relationships, and for those you love. Use detachment. Just because other people don't like these things about you doesn't mean anything about you unless you want to make it true. So really work on the boundaries between where you end and others begin. And in the same vein, when we work on assertiveness, we start realizing that maybe we have a hard time giving others the same that we deserve. In other words, can you detach with others? Can you be happy for them even though your day isn't going well? Can you be happy for another's success because it isn't your own? That sort of thing. So as we step into our rights as a person, the right to our feelings, our thoughts, our needs, our boundaries, we also learn to respect that, oh yeah, everyone else has the same rights. And if I want healthy relationships, I may also need to start working on expressing how I can respect their thoughts, their feelings, their choices, their boundaries. Speaking of boundaries, a lot of times you're going to start working on assertiveness and you're going to gear up to say no to someone about something. And I don't want you to cave when it gets hard. Don't rescue after the no. You know, after you set that firm boundary that took a lot of thought and courage to set, And then all of a sudden, the other party goes into a rage, or they fall apart, or they start trying to make your life hell. Have the troops hold you accountable so you can hold the line. If you don't hold that line, nothing will get better or change. That line's got to be there first and foremost, and it can't move, because if it moves, then you're not being honest. You're like, I didn't really mean it. I was just kidding. So we have to learn how to handle sitting with other people's difficult feelings and detach from them. Doesn't mean we don't care. We just let them have their feelings. Remember, when we rescue, we're not rescuing them, we're rescuing ourselves because we can't handle it. Learn to trust yourself when being manipulated as well. Remember, that spidey sense is there for a reason. Listen to it. If you want to work on assertiveness, you need to also learn to preemptively grieve outcomes. In other words, in order for us not to people please and manage outcomes in our head, we have to therefore grieve a bunch of different outcomes that could happen. Maybe that person will end up hating me, you say. Maybe I won't get that job. Maybe my sister won't talk to me for a while. Maybe people will just be frustrated with me. Okay. So preemptively grieving means emotionally, I work through the vulnerable feelings around that. The surrender to what is. Maybe you're scared. Maybe you don't want to be disappointed. You don't want to be hurt. You don't want people to see you as an awful person. That is why it is so key when you start to do this work that you have people to talk to you about it, and you have a really good coach to remind you of your name, why what you did was healthy, to remind you what all the boundaries are in the situation, and that you're a good person, and that you had to do this. If you wanted things to get healthier, you had to start being different. So as you're working on being different, tell the truth. Make your insides match your outsides. You're not going to do it in the moment. Walk back in a day later, apologize and say, you know what, you've given it some thought and it just won't work for you and you're sorry. Or you won't have the time, or you just realize you have a thing. You take care of yourself with them. You don't make it about them. You don't do it with anger. You don't do it with frustration. You tamp down your fear, and you try to do it as thoughtfully as you could. Empathy and detachment. There's nothing wrong with them wanting to ask that of you. That's okay. That's about them. But just because they ask doesn't mean you can do it. Finally, own your choices. Every last stinking one of them. Never, ever put them on anyone else. Don't do the because of you I. Lovingly own your choices. Fess up. If you screw up, fess up. Tell on yourself if necessary. Just learn the lesson and move on. We have to do it. We have to do it because we want to grow and change. And unfortunately, it's going to be messy. We're not going to do this perfectly. No one does. All that matters is that you keep walking through it. All that matters is you continue every day to be more and more assertive, a little bit at a time. Because being assertive means being who you are, regardless of who is standing in front of you. That is what is key. And that eventually you'll have your own approval that you care about more than theirs. But here's the gig. We can't have our own approval if we're not being authentic, because we know we're lying. We know we're not telling them how we really feel. And there is no way that we can really trust and love and accept ourselves if we're still doing that. It is not possible. You can't people please and like who you are. It means working on your boundaries and your detachment skills. And that is a process that takes a lot of practice over time. It means working on your integrity, on your values. You want to be real. You want to be authentic. You want to be trustworthy. You want to be congruent. You want people to see you as consistent and confident. You want to see yourself as consistent and confident. Now, I want to talk about some of the fears that come up when we're trying to be assertive. Assertive is not aggressive, okay? And just because you're going to work on not people-pleasing, it's not going to mean that you stop caring. It's not going to mean that you're becoming selfish. No, you're not being selfish, I promise. You're actually going to be doing everyone around you a great big huge favor because you're going to be practicing self-care and taking care of yourself. No, you won't be abandoned, because here's why. The right people who can actually honor and respect you and your boundaries will understand and they will stay. The only people who won't, who are people who I think are probably very unhealthy and probably not good for your life right now anyway. No, you won't do this perfectly or right away. You're going to take a long time to gear up to be ready, and that's okay. Because you're going to get stronger every time you think about this, every time you read about it, every time you talk about it, every time you gear up the courage and don't pull the trigger. That's all right. You're just getting stronger. You're in training. And don't worry, you won't stop caring or giving. You will just do it without a particular outcome in mind. So today we talked about how draining and destructive people-pleasing can be and how working on it can be both exhilarating and scary, but I think can yield some incredible results in your relationships over time, especially the one you have with yourself. So if you don't have support, don't have a coach, grab one. If you need some counseling, grab that. Grab an online support group, whatever you need. You're going to need people around you that you can talk to about this who aren't going to judge you, but instead encourage you to do the healthy thing, to talk about conversations and things that are happening with people so they can give you a really good objective evaluation and remind you you're a good person who's just trying to be healthier and more authentic. Okay, so make sure you join us next week. That is our 100th episode of the Own It Powercast. I am really excited. It's quite a milestone, and all of you have been along the journey with me, and I can't thank you enough for being here because it's your needs, your struggles, and your courage and willingness to change that are the reason for this podcast. So as a thank you, during our next episode, we're going to be doing a special giveaway for 2 lucky people. So make sure you tune in and hang out with us, and we'll give you more details then. All right. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you stay healthy. You believe in yourself. You practice being healthier, and you hold on to hope. Be sure to check the show notes at ownitpowercast.com. And sign up for the newsletter. It comes out every Tuesday. It has everything in it, including the bonus downloads for each episode. All right, so pay it forward. Keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.